The 2026 FIFA World Cup was supposed to be the biggest sporting event in history. And in many ways, it still might be. More teams than ever before. More matches. More host cities. More stadiums. More countries. On paper, everything points to a historic tournament. But something unexpected is happening right now, just days before the opening kickoff. Thousands of tickets are still unsold. Resale prices on some matches have crashed to less than $100. Hotels in certain host cities are reporting booking numbers well below what they expected. And now, two state attorneys general in the United States have opened formal investigations into FIFA's ticketing practices. This is not the narrative. FIFA wanted heading into the biggest World Cup in football history. For months, FIFA President Gianni Infantino was talking about record-breaking demand. He said the organization received over 150 million ticket requests in the first 15 days of sales alone. He talked about a tournament that had the entire world holding its breath. And on the surface, those numbers sounded extraordinary. So how do we get from 150 million requests to thousands of empty seats just weeks before kickoff? That's exactly what we're going to break down today. Because this story is more complicated than it first appears. And what's happening right now could shape how FIFA runs the World Cup for decades to come. So what's really going on here? To understand the full picture, you have to go back to how FIFA decided to approach ticketing for this tournament from the very beginning. The 2026 World Cup is being hosted across 3 countries, the United States, Canada, and Mexico, spanning 16 host cities and 104 matches. That's a massive operation. And FIFA made a decision early on to introduce something called dynamic pricing, a model where ticket prices adjust based on demand in real time. This isn't new in the events industry. Airlines do it. Concert tours do it, but it had never been used at a FIFA World Cup before. The idea from FIFA's perspective made sense. You price tickets according to what the market will bear. High-demand matches get higher prices. Less popular group stage games stay more accessible. In theory, the system should balance itself out. But in practice, something went wrong. Prices for matches, across the United States and Canada reportedly, climbed by around 25%. Between October 2025 and April 2026, fans who had already committed their money found themselves sitting with seats that had been quietly reclassified. And then, in April, FIFA introduced an entirely new ticket category, something called front category seats, which were priced even higher than anything previously on offer. A front row seat in the lower bowl for the final now costs more than $30,000. That's not a typo. $30,000 for one seat at one football match. For context, the cheapest ticket to the 2022 World Cup final in Qatar cost the equivalent of around 450 British pounds. The equivalent ticket for the 2026 final is now listed at over £3,000 through official National Association channels. And on the open resale market, some final seats have been listed for close to $2 million. None of this went unnoticed. Fans were outraged. Fan groups accused FIFA of acting like scalpers through their own official platforms. And the criticism kept building until it crossed into legal territory. Here's where things get interesting. The Attorneys General of New York and New Jersey officially launched a joint investigation into FIFA's ticketing practices in late May 2026. Subpoenas were issued. Internal documents were requested. The investigation is focused particularly on MetLife Stadium in New Jersey, which is hosting 8 matches including the World Cup final on July 19th. The probe centers on several specific concerns. First, the allegation that fans were misled about the location of their seats, that they paid for one area of the stadium and ended up with something quite different. Second, the way dynamic pricing was used to create a sense of artificial urgency, encouraging fans to pay high prices immediately out of fear that nothing would be left later. One attorney described it plainly. He said FIFA had been withholding information about how many tickets were actually still available, and when prices might change, keeping buyers in the dark while holding all the leverage. Another expert quoted in the coverage used the phrase scare tactics, the suggestion that if you don't pay now, you'll miss out on a once-in-a-lifetime moment. The issue is that this strategy may have worked against FIFA in the end, because right now, With just days before the tournament starts, there are still thousands of tickets sitting unsold. At least 9 group stage games are showing more than 1,000 available seats each. Some matches are listing tickets on secondary markets for less than $100. Jordan versus Algeria in San Francisco was listed as low as $98 on resale. Platforms, a far cry from the premium prices. FIFA had been pushing. The resale market is being described by industry experts as being driven almost entirely by speculative buyers who purchased early expecting prices to keep rising, and who are now stuck holding tickets they can't move at the price they wanted. And consumers? They've been watching, waiting, and increasingly deciding to stay home. But that's only part of the story. What's happening with FIFA's ticketing isn't just about one tournament. It's about a deeper question in football. Who is the World Cup actually for? Think about it. The World Cup has always been positioned as the people's game. It's the tournament where a family in Buenos Aires saves up for years to watch their country play. It's where supporters from Senegal or Morocco travel thousands of miles to follow their team for the first time on a global stage. The World Cup was built on that energy, that passion, those fans. What happens when the ticket to that experience costs more than a month's salary? What happens when the seat next to you isn't filled by a supporter who's followed this team for 30 years, but by someone who bought it as a corporate hospitality package and checked out by halftime? An economics professor at the College of the Holy Cross raised exactly this concern. He described a scenario where stadiums, instead of being filled with vibrant and excited supporters, become rooms full of wealthy attendees on their phones. And he said that's not just a cultural loss. It's a threat to the entire business model of the World Cup itself. Because the atmosphere in those stadiums is part of what makes the broadcast compelling. It's what makes the highlight reels feel electric. Without that energy, you lose something fundamental. Previous World Cups understood this balance better than the 2026 edition appears to have managed. In Qatar in 2022, prices were high by historical standards, but FIFA maintained a specific tier of fan-priced tickets at accessible levels. Supporters could still get into group stage games without spending a small fortune. In Russia in 2018, the tournament was widely praised for its atmosphere, and a large part of that was because regular fans could actually afford to be there. The 2026 model broke from that precedent, and the consequences are becoming visible now. For the players, the experience of performing in front of a sold-out, raucous stadium is something that simply cannot be replicated. Ask any footballer what the atmosphere of a World Cup stadium does to the quality of the match itself, and the answer is always the same. The crowd matters. The noise matters. The electricity matters. Teams like Morocco, Japan, and South Korea, who all have passionate global fan bases, would typically expect their group stage matches to be atmospheric occasions. But if those fans have been priced out, or if they've decided that the trip to North America simply isn't financially viable, those matches could look and feel very different from what the players and coaches are expecting. For players who've waited their entire careers for a World Cup appearance, the idea of walking out in front of a half-empty stadium would be quietly devastating, even if no one would say it publicly. And then there's the fan experience itself. The 2026 World Cup is being spread across 16 cities in 3 countries. That means fans who want to follow their team through the group stage could potentially be dealing with internal flights between cities thousands of miles apart, hotel bookings in multiple locations, and all of this on top of tickets that were already among the most expensive in World Cup history. Reports have emerged from several host cities that hotel bookings are trending below expectations. Some local businesses in host cities have told journalists that the level of interest and foot traffic they were anticipating simply hasn't materialized. Whether that changes dramatically once the tournament actually begins remains to be seen. The World Cup has a way of generating its own momentum once a ball is kicked. But right now, heading into the opening match, there are real and legitimate questions being asked about whether the scale of the tournament outpaced the reality of what fans could afford to engage with. So what happens next? FIFA is in a difficult position. On one hand, they have a formal legal investigation on their hands in one of their primary host countries. On the other hand, the tournament starts in a matter of days, and there isn't much that can be realistically changed at this stage. A few things are being watched closely. First, whether FIFA makes any further moves to release additional tickets at lower price points. There were brief windows where discounted tickets appeared, including some at $60, but these were limited and seen by many observers as a response to the growing criticism rather than a meaningful structural change. Second, whether the legal investigation produces any real consequences for how FIFA operates going forward. If the attorneys general in New York and New Jersey are able to establish that FIFA acted unfairly or deceptively toward consumers, it could set a precedent for how future World Cup ticketing is handled, not just in the United States, but globally. Third, and perhaps most importantly for the tournament itself, whether the atmosphere inside the stadiums over the coming weeks tells a different story from the one being told by the unsold ticket data. Sometimes the energy of the World Cup overwhelms everything else. Fans who couldn't afford official tickets may find ways in. Last-minute bookings may surge. The tournament may deliver on its historic promise regardless. The best realistic scenario is that the football itself becomes the headline, that a handful of memorable matches, a few unexpected results, and the sheer spectacle of 48 nations competing across 3 countries drowns out the noise around ticketing controversies. Football has an extraordinary ability to create its own story. The more concerning scenario is that the empty seats and the legal proceedings become a recurring news cycle throughout the tournament, casting a shadow over what should have been one of sport's great celebrations. That the images that define FIFA 2026 include sections of unfilled stadium alongside the goals and the celebrations. FIFA will want to avoid that, but right now, they're navigating the consequences of pricing decisions that may have fundamentally misjudged what their own fans were willing and able to pay. So that's where things stand as the 2026 FIFA World Cup prepares to kick off. A tournament that's set out to be the biggest in history is entering its opening days, surrounded by genuine questions about affordability, transparency, and who the World Cup is really being built for. Thousands of tickets remain unsold. Resale prices have crashed on a number of games. 2 state attorneys general are demanding answers, and fans around the world are watching to see whether the football itself can rise above all of it. The situation is still developing, and there's every chance the tournament delivers exactly the spectacle it promised. But the conversations happening right now about dynamic pricing, about fan access, about the commercialization of football's greatest stage, those conversations aren't going anywhere, regardless of what happens between now and July 19th. What do you think about this? Do you think FIFA's pricing strategy has crossed a line? Or is this just the reality of a premium global event in 2026? And if you had the chance to attend the World Cup, would the current ticket situation put you off? Let us know in the comments. There are no wrong answers here, and this is exactly the kind of conversation that football needs to keep having. If you found this breakdown useful, consider leaving a like. It genuinely helps this channel reach more football fans who care about these stories. And if you're not subscribed yet, now's a good time. There's a lot more to cover as the tournament unfolds, and we'll be right here keeping track of every development. This story is still developing, and as always, football never stays quiet for long. See you in the next one.